Okay, let's call the General Purposes Committee meeting to order. There's another motion from Councillor Day who wishes it to be put on the agenda. I think you all have it. It's the one on buy local information for Richmondites. And I suggest we would put that after number 2. So it would be new number 3. And then the additional information on the grants would be number 4. So may I have a motion on that? All those in favor, opposed, carried. All right, motion on the committee minutes. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Okay, so then we have the OCP targeted update, the public engagement. John, anything to add to your report?
Nothing further to add. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. This has taken a painfully long time, but I'm assuming that the Bill 44 and 46 had something to do with that?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, correct. The bills basically we had to put everything aside to adopt the bylaws that were adopted last year for the small scale multi-unit housing in the transit oriented areas. So we've basically tried to put the OCP review back on track last fall, and we have until the end of the year to get it done.
Okay, and I see the numbers of people that have been communicating with the city through Let's Talk Richmond and also in person. Do you consider those numbers a success, or would you like to see more people come out?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, I guess my first reaction is yes, I would like to see the numbers a little higher. However, reflecting on past engagements when we're talking about sort of high-level concepts, it's not surprising to see lower numbers. I'm anticipating that when we do go back to the public in June this year, that we will see greater engagement just because we'll be refining the topic areas a bit more and asking the public on what they feel about certain policy directions.
Just one last question. So people are starting to go on vacations the end of June and into July. Is there any chance of bumping it up a little bit?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, what I can hope for is that we can maybe get started towards the end of May and early part of June and not get into the summer months. Yeah.
Well done. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Appreciate where we're going. I hope down the road that we'll be able to have a workshop with council too in terms of doing the thing, the OCP like we did the last time when Terry Crow actually did it. I just have some comments and actually a question that it's not in there, and the direction you're going is, first of all, the status of single-family homes in Richmond, given this big qualm to get more housing, but it's not single-family. The future of density, infrastructure, transportation, and NIMBYism. I'd like to, no, I'm very serious about that. I mean, people come and say, I like what you're doing, but if you're going to build 4 stories beside me, I don't like it. And I think we need to be put that in on it. And I guess how much more can we do? We're looking at 2050 in Richmond. And I said this back when Malcolm and I got elected. We now have 235,000 people. We said we would put 285,000 people on the islands before we sink. And it's a $50,000 difference for the next 50,000 person difference until we reach our max. Has anybody thought of that? What it's going to look like at 2050 with 285,000 people there? You won't be able to go from Steveston to anywhere. Mm-hmm. So I just throw those out. I think, Your Worship, in this, it's great that we're going to come up with a plan. It's got to be done by the end of next year. But there's some very practical, realistic issues that we're going to have to come to deal with because our infrastructure is not keeping up. Just go over to Gilbert again, and Williams and Gilbert, and the cones are out again, and the trucks are out, and the shovels are out, and we're digging up more and more. So anyhow, I think that's something we should be looking at down the road in terms of part and parcel of the OCP. So I'll just throw that out for now.
Councillor Heed?
Yes, a couple things with respect to this. When do you anticipate phase 2 to be completed?
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, I would say phase 2 would be completed by the end of June. when we complete our consultation, and then we would begin phase 3, which is the preparation of the revised OCP.
And then that would be only the 3 phases and then the document.
That's correct. The third phase is the document in the bylaw.
Now, this may pertain to this or not, but it'd be interesting to see what feedback we're getting. You recall when we approved the development at Lansdowne, we were contemplating reopening the OCP to look at what we're going to do with the numbers on affordable housing, et cetera. Does that play into this at all, and are you getting any feedback with respect to that?
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, I would say, no, we're not getting into those details with the Lansdowne. Essentially, it was an area plan or a specific policy for Lansdowne, so we wouldn't be getting into those specific details. However, if we do receive feedback related to Lansdowne, we're happy to incorporate that, and we can use that as part of the discussion. But the OCP is a little bit higher level than a detailed master plan.
So when we look at the overall vision under the OCP, it won't necessarily identify specific areas such as Lansdowne with respect to how we're going to treat that particular geographic area.
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, what I would say is Lansdowne, the current area plan or the current policies for Lansdowne would remain. However, if there is feedback through this process that would require us to open up the Lansdowne master plan, then that would be done as a separate project.
Thank you.
Okay, someone want to move it? Moved and seconded. Further comments? All those in favor, opposed, carried. Okay, the next one is the assessing the impact, et cetera, et cetera. Jack, do you want to introduce it? Just hang on a sec.
This motion is basically very simple and straightforward. Well, for a long time, I wish that we could purchase more local products and services, but I was told that we cannot do that because of the free trade agreement with the United States, and we are obliged to open up our procurement process to contractors on the other side of the border. So I think with what's going on right now is an opportunity for us to review our procurement process and see, what we can do better in terms of supporting local business and also to use more Canadian product and services. And apart from the motion and the rationale for the motion, I also provided additional information on the motion, pointing out that, well, in the past months, at least, or past weeks, at least 6 other cities had similar motions, including Vancouver, Burnaby, Surrey, Maple Ridge, Delta, and Victoria. And what's interesting was that in Surrey, they canceled a $740,000 contract with a U.S. based company, and the mayor even commented that even if they have to pay more by using a Canadian company, they are willing to do that. So I think this is the kind of sentiment right now in the country, in the province, and the lower mainland. So I think that this would be fitting into what's going on.
All right, do you want to move it then?
Yes, move.
Moved and seconded. Councilor McNulty?
Now, a question to you, to staff, first of all. What is our current procurement policy? Do we have one? And what is it? I know we put out 3 bids, et cetera, but I assume that we automatically would choose a Canadian company. Is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, yes, we do have a procurement policy in place. It's guided by the trade treaties, and above certain dollar thresholds, we publicly advertise those procurement opportunities. We are not allowed to discriminate on the basis of local preference, and we advertise those procurement opportunities to everybody. With regard to the trade treaties themselves, they are different. Canada has signed up to multiple trade treaties. There's also domestic trade treaties. Those procurement obligations don't extend to the United States. So most of these obligations are to across Canada, from province to province trade, not necessarily to the US.
Okay. Now, I'm just curious on it when we we do choose, staff come with a recommendation, usually three bids, and the reasons why you picked X, Y, and Z. And I know nobody has said anything about it. The other question, well, to staff, on the first one, the impact on local businesses, wouldn't the Chamber of Commerce have information in terms of stuff that we're looking for? What the impact is, buying and selling and trading? I would hope that they would be able to rattle that off very quickly.
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, yes, the Chamber Network in Canada is currently in the process of collecting information and data from businesses across the country to understand the impacts of the potential tariffs on their businesses in order to form their advocacy positions to senior government and policymakers.
Okay, well, what about the Richmond Chamber? Well, knowing where the Richmond base is?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, yes, absolutely. The Richmond Chamber of Commerce is also working through their chamber network to collect that data from Richmond businesses.
Okay, I guess my comment, Your Worship, I'm very surprised that we kind of have to wait till a national body does something and a provincial. You know, it's like the flag. We have Flag Day. It's nice to bring it to our attention, but every day is Flag Day, okay, in Canada. At least I hope it is, being a Canadian. So I just wondered about some of the information. The other question is, how much time is staff going to have to take on this? And is it going to go through Your Worship? Is it going to go through your office to do all this work? And do you have enough staff to do it?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, item 1 and the remaining items are separate. So item 1, certainly the Economic Development Office would be well positioned through our regular work to respond to. For the remainder of the items, it would be our finance and purchasing colleagues who would be reviewing the procurement policy.
And at what time, stage will we get information from, let's say, the Chamber, the Chinese Business Associations, et cetera? There are a number of other groups out there.
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, it is, as you know, an evolving situation, and at this point, until we understand the exact nature and extent of the tariffs, including any potential retaliatory tariffs put in place by the Canadian government, it would be difficult to definitively quantify. But I would say that after that March 4th deadline that's been imposed by the United States, we'll certainly be in a better position to report back.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Your Worship, I would just add to that. I mean, obviously at the staff level, we're very aware of the tariff situation. So for the last month, staff have been actively reaching out to our vendors and our contractors to get assessments on what the impacts might be. Obviously, as Ms. Ferland has indicated, there's a lot of unknowns, obviously, and it's moving day to day, week to week. But we do have a lot of locally sourced contractors, consultants. Largely our construction program, I would say, is in the range of 75% locally sourced already. And most of the feedback we're getting at this point is for most of the stuff we procure, there either isn't really any option or we are largely Canadian sourced, if not locally sourced as it is. But that is actively being going on. So some of the stuff we'll be able to bring back to you relatively short period of time as we get confirmation from our vendors.
Yeah, okay, my last point here is, are we going to, through Your Worship, not to staff, are we going to pass a resolution for the council to buy local, buy Canada only,
That
and
kind of
take a
gets us
stand?
to the next item.
Okay.
Councillor Day's motion.
I think we should have a very open statement to encourage people to buy local. And
Councillor Heed.
Yes, I've got the two motions in front of me, and they're very convoluted, other than Councillor Day's motion, which I'm not sure what Councillor Au is asking for. When I read the actual motion, whoever wrote it on his behalf, it's certainly looking at something a bit different. There's 4 points to that particular motion. Only 1 point is talking about procurement of Canadian goods, and that's number 2, not number 4. And then in his opening remarks, he alluded to the fact of the buy local, which I think is Councillor Day's motion here coming forward. And then we hear from our staff with respect to how we're guided by policy federally here I'm kind of unclear as to what Councillor Au is actually looking for. Is he actually looking for procurement, or is he actually looking for beyond that, where we get very political? And so that's my first issue. The second issue is, I think this is ultra vires. I think this is beyond what we should be doing as a local government, and I'm certainly encouraged by Councillor Day bringing forward, let's encourage people to buy local. But if we've got procurement practices that are based on other policies throughout this nation that we have to follow, I think we follow and we're guided by those. There's a lot of energy put into this right now. We don't even know if this person down south with his character, whether he's going to have a change of mind before March comes along. So I won't be supporting the motion. I certainly will be looking for more refinement if Councillor Au is able to provide it at this particular time beyond the additional information with respect to what other councillors or councils in British Columbia are doing.
Councillor Liu?
Thank you, Worship. I think it would be helpful to understand, I know we have an annual report on our vendors, our sunshine list, that sort of thing, like if any of them are in fact not Canadian companies, whether they're south of the border or offshore, that would be helpful to understand. I think it's worth looking into if we can change anything. I understand with the free trade agreements, there's not really much we can do, and I don't think this is something we should have staff spend a long time on. I also think that there's the possibility that it ties our hands on some things. I know we saw in Calgary last year, they had their big water main break and they had to procure some giant part from San Diego or something. And so, you know, if we have, you know, a big thing happen in the city of Richmond and we need to get a part, we don't want to have sort of tied our hands on where we can get things just because, you know, we're having a bit of a trade dispute over tariffs. We have tariffs between provinces. We've always had tariffs back and forth with the US. My dad was in the lumber industry. I grew up hearing him complain bitterly about countervailing duties and everything else in the lumber industry, and I know it's been ongoing for my whole life and our whole life. It's showing up as something bigger right now, but it too shall pass, and I don't think we want to be tying our hands. We also don't want to be roping ourselves into paying extra for things. Further on in our agenda, we're looking at spending $100,000, finding an extra $100,000 to spend on the people here in Richmond, that some of our most vulnerable, and to sort of sit here planning to possibly pay more for certain goods and services that maybe we already get, because it turns out the pencils are made in the US instead of in Canada, isn't necessarily clever use of our tax dollars either. And maybe we just put a hold on some purchases altogether. But I'd like to do a small dive into this, not a deep dive into this. And I would support a further idea of supporting our community to buy local with our local companies here in Richmond. Thanks.
Councillor Day?
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. I looked at this motion and I just couldn't understand why, like, Richmond Council directs staff to conduct an assessment of the economic impacts of the Canada-US tariff war on local business or residents. This is a federal responsibility. And then when I look at the city staff to review current procurement, well, we just heard from Mr. Irving that we already buy 75% local anyways. And then Mr. Irving also reminded us that when we're buying anything, it always comes to council. And there's general information about each and every person that has bid on the project. And we often will choose a company that's local because that's the way we are. We're Canadian. We want to support local businesses. So it sounds like we don't need a policy because we're already doing it. And then I thought about all the work that this would take by staff. Right now, there are 50 referrals that staff are working on. I don't think it's fair to throw this on their lap as well. I would, however, like a memo explaining the steps that we do take and how we are trying to buy local. And I think that's information we probably want to share with the public. So I won't be supporting this.
Councillor Hobbs?
Thanks, and through the chair. Well, interesting discussion, and I agree it's not particularly necessarily entirely in our bailiwick, but U.S. trade relations are important to Canada, the province, and obviously every city, including Richmond, and probably will remain so down the road after this storm has passed. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to have a bit of a not too in-depth snapshot of where we are and what can be done. I just have a question for the writer of it, the mover of it, actually, just to confirm, if I kind of summarize it, to me, it appears to be having an initial look at the impact of the current economic situation, what's pending, what might happen and what might not happen, provide some clarification and priorities as to our process for procuring things, but also purchasing and buying in Richmond. And then also to have a brief assessment of the impact of what the treaties are and obligations that are beyond our scope and that do obligate us to things. So if I boiled it down to that, it's basically an overall assessment of the potential impact, ability to prioritize local products, buy local, that kind of thing, and a report to council that includes an assessment of our treaty obligations that are imposed on us by other levels of government. And if it's something that simple, then I don't have an objection to staff having a look at that without creating too much work. So the question is to the mover on that one.
Councillor Au?
Yes, well, actually, I'm not asking for a whole lot, but I think we need that information because every community is different. For example, for part one, we may assume that, there's some impact, but we are not, maybe, right, we are less impacted because we are not really a resources community, which will be impacted by the tariff to a large degree. We could be, because of our type of business going on in the community, we are least impacted. But I don't know. So that's why, I want to have some kind of information like that. And again, yes, staff told us that this is what they've been doing. But again, before this, did we know about that? Before I move this motion, ask this question, do we know that? Probably not. So what I'm asking for is, okay, a snapshot of what's going on, what could be the impact, what should we get ready for? I'm in full support of buy local. However, as I mentioned, staff also confirmed that sometimes we're being tied, our hands are being tied because of some trade agreements. So again, let's have some kind of clarification, a clearer picture of what's the situation, instead of just assuming that, okay, we know everything. I think what I'm asking for is, yes, help us to understand better, help to better understand the situation, and in case if we have to prepare to do some changes in our practice or policies, let's be ready for it. That's what I'm asking for. I'm not asking for 400 pages of analysis.
Councillor McNulty?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I want to follow up on that. I see three totally different things here. And I need staff, so when you ask to conduct an assessment of local business and the residents, how are we going to do that? What are we going to do? And how much staff time is going to take, okay? And I don't have that answer. I'd like to have that answer. I don't want staff having to tie up everything and just do it. And I agree with everything said. I think we should do something. The procurement policy, we've got our staff here telling us about the procurement policy, what we can do, what we can't do. But how the city can prioritize, how are we going to do that? But the third one was to engage the provincial federal government, seek clarification, increase municipal flexibility. How are we going to do that, and who we can ask, and what are we doing? So I guess what I'm trying to get is what are the expectations and results? I just heard Councillor Au say he wants a snapshot. Well, this isn't a snapshot. This is a full dive in. So I kind of, whether we water them down, Your Worship, or we vote on them one at a time, there are some that I think we can quickly probably do. The third one, probably a letter and a few contacts with some ministers. Well, I don't know about Ottawa right now with the House not in place, but maybe with some of them we can get quickly. But the other two, I'm just concerned about. I want to support it, but I want to know what I'm supporting here as well. And in terms of staff, so is the how. So if the writer can tell me how we're doing, what we're going to expect, local businesses. We've got 14,000 businesses in Richmond. Boy, I don't know how we're gonna come in. And that's why I asked about the involvement of the Chamber of Commerce and all the other businesses, associations. What information might they have already? And it would be good, and not only just Canada, United States, could be Canada, China, Canada, South America, Canada, whatever, or Richmond companies, because we know a lot of companies in Richmond work overseas, all over the world, in terms of businesses. So anyway, that's what I'd like to try to get.
I wonder, just,
I think we need some changes in the wordings.
well, then propose that.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to
I'm
get
going to
at.
suggest in number 3 to delete the words engage with the provincial and federal governments, because that makes it sound like a far bigger exploration, I think, than you're talking about. So it would read, the city of Richmond seek clarification on our trade obligations, okay? So
Yeah, I can
that's,
support that.
okay, is that a friendly? Is that everybody okay with that?
You okay with that?
Okay. Just a minute, okay. Go ahead.
Well, actually, on that point, many cities are asking the provincial and the federal government to clarify on that. UPCM is also doing the work.
I know, but we wouldn't necessarily have to ask them. We can ask whoever knows what they're talking about,
Yeah.
is what I'm thinking. Okay, I've got Councillor Glanders.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just, I have some comments. I agree with a lot of the discussion. But regarding the change, the friendly that you just did on number 3, it kind of doesn't make sense because the second half of that says to advocate for increased municipal flexibility. So who are we advocating for that to if we took the engaging with the other governments out of there? We might have to just say, the city of Richmond seek clarification on our trade obligations and leave it at that because.
Are you okay with that, Chuck? Okay,
Okay, and then,
on our trade obligations, period, basically.
you know, and they can come back with seeing if there's anything that we can do. Item 2, I feel like staff already told us, you know, what the procurement policy is. I don't mind a memo coming back about what we've already just heard. But it is item 1 that concerns me the most, just based on the agreeing with the comments that Councilor McNulty made for staff to conduct an assessment of the economic impacts on local businesses. It's too open-ended I just think it could be I mean, staff is obviously hearing the comments and maybe they wouldn't do a deep dive into it, but I just don't think it's a good use of staff time to analyze all the different businesses. Let's see how many retail stores we have. Where do they get their products from? Let's see how many restaurants we have. Where do they get the food from? I think it could take too much time. I think this is a good thing that we're looking at this, and I think it's good for us to understand what our policy is and how we can support Canadian businesses, and for staff to just come back with a memo. This is our procurement policy. We've looked at what our trade obligations are and tell us what we can do, if anything.
Okay, on that point, again, going back to Councillor Au, how would it be if, number 1, instead of direct staff to conduct an assessment of the economic, et cetera, just direct staff to review the likely economic impacts?
Okay.
Okay? That likely economic impacts of the war. See, when I'm reading this, I think that, I take the point that, boy, you could really have a PhD thesis on all this stuff, but I don't think that that's, to me, that's not what I read that is proposed. I think what is proposed is to talk to the economic development people, talk to the chamber, talk to maybe another business group or two. Other cities have done or will be doing a lot of this same stuff. So there's, I think for a fairly reasonable amount of effort, we can find out a whole lot, which will then tell us the likely impacts and whether there should be changes and adjustments we should make. I hear what is said about, you know, how deep you could have a dive, but I don't think that's what you're looking for. I see you nodding your head. Okay, so, you bet.
So maybe I just should have let you finish, Mayor. Because
I'm
so you're changing one,
Yeah,
correct? We're eliminating two.
no,
We're keeping that procurement in after the information we're getting.
yeah, we're gonna review our procurement policy. It may take 5 minutes if they've already done it.
Okay, but that's not what, there's some additional things to that. As brief as you say it is, absolutely review our procurement policy.
Well, okay. In light of recent trade developments, are you okay to stop
Yep.
there?
Yep,
All right.
and you're amending 3?
Yeah, 3 reads the city of Richmond seek clarification on our trade obligations, period.
And this is going to be compiled in a report to come back to us.
Well, yeah, but you've seen it before. If it can be done in a memo or something like that.
Yes, but I'm just trying to clarify whether we're coming back and we're now going to look at another motion or something like that. If it's a memo report, fine, thank you.
With a memo, if someone feels that we need to bring something back to committee or council, it can be done. All right, so you've got the amendments to it? You've got the amendments to it? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? That is carried. Then the kind of the companion resolution is, Councillor Day, do you want to introduce your motion? I think we have it pretty clearly.
Yep, thank you very much, Mayor Brody. So the motion is to buy local information for Richmondites, that direct staff to research and highlight options for citizens to buy local in Richmond, promote information on the city website, city portals, and city facilities. And so my vision is that you would click on the website and it will connect you to everything. When I went on the website to look for this, it was all over the place, like the Economic Business Office over here, tourism over here, local farm markets, probably not on there at all. And what I really felt was that if people knew they could go down to the docks and buy fish, they would. If they knew they could go on Number 6 Road and buy turkey, they would. If they knew that Sandus Winery had dried berries and frozen blueberries, they would buy that. That local businesses are brewing beer and wine, that there's pop-up markets. It'd be nice if there was just a quick link so that people say, oh, I need some carrots and some veggies this weekend. Oh, there's a local market over at Kwantlen. And then, of course, local farmers and the farm map, which is on our website, it's just really hard to find. And so I'd like to be a go-to, because everyone's asking me, what can I do to buy local? What can I do? And I'm like, well, I start rattling off. Just be easy for people to just go on the website and, buy clothes that's made locally and sold in Steveston.
So you're going to move it?
I'll move it.
Moved and seconded. Councillor McNulty?
Yeah, it's just like to add in there for the minutes, if we can, is to encourage the Chamber of Commerce, as Councillor Day has said, and tourism, to also do the same thing. I think we all have to be together on this, and the other organizations that are out there in all communities with regard to economic development on that. There are a number of them, and I think we should let them know that we've already done this, and we're encouraging everybody to do that. She mentioned that things like Kwantlen College, for example. When they have the market across the street on Tuesdays, I want to see you there. So I think somewhere in there that we encourage the chamber to get involved. They've been very silent from my perspective, and so is tourism, not so much, but the chamber and that, we got to get them moving along. We need everybody involved.
All right, let's call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. The additional information on the health grants, et cetera. Dorothy, anything to add?
To the chair, I have nothing to add to the report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Now, these are all one-time grants. If we were to give them, it's one time, right?
To the chair, that's correct.
How will we let the organizations know that they are one-time?
To the chair, we sent them a letter letting them know that they will be receiving a one-time additional funding from the city.
Okay, I think you really need to stress that point, because pretty quickly you get a dependency. Counselor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you. That was one of my comments because we've helped them out in 2024, now 2025. And what are we going to do next year for 2026? Because the issue is still going to be there. And we need to help them maybe with looking for additional grants for the provincial government and what have you. I think with this, we should be writing letters to the MPs and the MLAs to let them know how much we're, I'm not saying bailing them out because they do great work, that's not the word I want. But they've got to look at these kinds of issues that are here on that, and I think that we need to go through there on that. The Church on 5, this includes the 20,000 extra, correct?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty.
For extra monies to make it, yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, other members of council, but this includes the 20,000 that enables them to do the work down at the bottom here. Supply local wide travel 20,000 to make 110,000. Is that what we're talking about? Have I missed it?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, the additional one-time funding of 65,000 will bring total city funding to 90,000, which will fund the 2 outreach workers.
Well, okay, all right, thank you. It's included then. No.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. No, I actually did the math on this, Councillor McNulty, and, okay, we'll start with A. The Parish of St. Albans requested 65,000. 38,000 was approved previously. That left a balance of 26,000, but they're only getting 11, so they're short 15,000. B is Church on 5, which had a request for 110,000. And in the last meeting, we approved 25,000, which left a balance of 85,000, so they are 20,000 short. Salvation Army requested the 20,000 because they got a 30K donation, so that's an extra that we did not vote on previously. And the Christian Addictions Recovery Ministry, $2,500 for printed material and publications, we've also not approved previously, so that's new as well. I did a lot of research into what we're getting for the $110,000 with Church on 5, and last year they did 73 referrals to Vancouver Coast for detox. Yeah, okay, I got the order. And then they did referrals for everything from housing all over the Lower Mainland, not just in Richmond. And I heard that if they don't get this extra, if we don't bump it up an extra $20,000, they won't be able to afford things like storage for all their coats, jackets, blanks, and food, which they're actually paying for out of pocket right now. They also wouldn't be able to help with they transport people that are unable to take the bus with their cars, and that would be quite detrimental. We wouldn't have people using our winter shelters without that transportation. They will lose 2 part-time outreach workers that are critical, and I feel that we need to, these people are working for pennies on the dollar. If we were going to pay ourselves to do this work, the 24,000 meals, I think there was, 164 blankets, just the pure materials that they supply, let alone the meals, which is almost 25,000 annually. So I think that given that we're getting such a bargain at $110,000, we should raise it from 65 to 85 so they get the full 110,000 that they requested, and the same for St. Albans.
Now, can you please compare what they are at, what you recommend with what they have previously received?
The chair, Parish of St. Albans received 50,000 last year. And this was also include a one-time additional funding. And
So this brings up to 50.
then this one in 2025 would bring them, would make them receive the same level of
Right.
funding as last year.
That's my point.
Yeah.
What about Church on 5?
Same for Church on 5 to the chair. The Church on 5 received almost 90,000, 89,000 plus last year. And this includes one-time additional funding as well. And this, in 2025, it's recommended that they receive 90,000, which is a similar level of funding as last year.
Councilor McNulty.
Yeah, that's what I was asking, whether the extra 20 was in there. That's where I was coming from. So it was not in there. Oh, so the extra money is not in there. And given the work that they do, I'm suggesting to make their program, if we take 20,000 from, I believe there's 25,000 or more still left in council contingency to,
We'll use the same sorts of funds.
well, all right. Well, I suggest we add the 20,000 to the list of them have. I think it's critical right now with where we are and what we're seeing and all the things that are happening around us, that we have these outreach workers out there. We're at a very crossroads and critical state within this community. I think people have to wake up around the table, this table anyhow, of really what's happening and taking place out there. And if we can have some outreach workers working along the way, maybe we can move forward with our social issues that are plaguing us.
Councilor Hobbs.
Well, thank you, and through the chair. First of all, thanks for another report on a very difficult subject. As we've said before, there's always going to be more need than there is actually funds available through government. I agree with Councillor McNulty earlier on, mentioned about communicating with the provincial government, whatever ministries require to be communicated with regarding funding, because a few years ago when they started the Sustainable Communities Fund, it was actually not sustainable. It's the unsustainable fund for communities because they provided money and then they took it away. And now Richmond and other cities as well are starting to fill in that gap, which is commendable on the one hand, but I think we also have to be aware of the fact that there are limited funds and all of the money comes from really one source, a taxpayer. I mean, the gaming funds are another thing, but they seem to be decreasing and aren't sustainable as well. So I'll get to the point of my comment, and that is, and Councilor McNulty mentioned that too, what is the plan for 2026? If this is one-time funding, we can afford to do the one-time funding, even if we add a little bit to it this year, so that's fine. But I understand there's a report coming forward, and what I would be looking for is just maybe a brief comment on establishing a more defined budget for these things, because the funding is not predictable or sustainable in all cases, even gaming. So I just think we should look more clearly at what kind of things are going to be funded, what level of funding is going to be provided for certain types of grants, for certain types of organizations, because it's not just 497 plus this, it's actually more like 1.5 million when you add into the things that we've developed different methods of paying, but the money essentially is all coming from the same source. So if you can just comment a little bit, I believe there's a report coming forward that's going to dive into this a little bit more in terms of how we're going to proceed going forward, because the question about 2026 remains. This is one time. So what happens after that? Because people, it's harder to take things away than it is to give things to people. So that'll be difficult. So maybe a comment on the report that's coming forward and what we could expect. Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs. So staff will work with grant applicants to reflect the overall funding needs in 2025 and to seek external sources of funding for their application for the 2026 HSS grant cycle. In addition to that, staff is in the process of completing a review of the Health, Social, and Safety Grant Program, which will include an analysis of the HSS grant budget and overall sustainability and equitable distribution of city resources. And a report will be brought forward to council sometime in the second quarter of this year for implementation on the 2026 HSS grant cycle.
Okay, just thanks for that, because I think that'll be very instructive for our decisions going into 2026 and how we deal with the ever-growing need and shortage of funds. Thanks.
Councilor Heed.
Yes, I am glad you made that comment on the HSS grants, because I think we've got to rethink this and reestablish how we're going to cover off what's needed here. So I have a question with respect to, you realize that we've increased the outreach workers from the city point of view. We've increased the bylaw officers from the city point of view. And I know Mr. Chong may not like what I'm going to say because we're caught up in the line budgeting, but for the positions not filled, the savings of that money, where did it go to and what could you tell me it's estimated at? Because we did come up with money and establish where we were getting the money from for those 4 bylaw officers and for the outreach workers.
Through the chair to Councillor Heath, the savings from any salary surplus goes back to the rate stabilization account.
So, Mr. Chong, do we have any estimation? Maybe we can get that because, and I understand the budgeting process that we have etched in stone. But when we start talking about money that's going into the rate stabilization fund, could you tell me or estimate based on those savings, just around about whether it's going to be in excess of 20,000 or under 20,000 in those savings?
And through the chair to Councillor Heath, annually the rate stabilization, the operating surplus is approximately 6 million. And that's not just from salary surplus, but it's also comprised of savings from the RCMP, building permit revenues, and other efficiencies that the city has conducted, or monies that haven't been spent on programs that carried forward to the future year to be utilized.
Thank you. So the point I want to make here is Church on 5 is doing outreach work. They're doing a lot for the underprivileged here in Richmond that we expect to be doing once we have our outreach workers trained up and working at the level that the Church on 5 outreach workers work at. So the point I want to make, if we're looking to give them additional money so they can maintain the services, including those outreach workers, remember, as Councillor Hobbs said, it all comes from the same source, the taxpayers here in Richmond. Whether we put that line item back in one particular fund, we take that amount of money to make sure that we have this work looked after within our municipality.
Councillor Glanders.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I agree with the comments made by everybody so far, and thank you for this report and coming back with this, these recommendations. I have a question about the Council Community Initiative account. So that's the account that's recommended that this be funded from. And are you okay to disclose what the balance is in that fund, or can it handle an increase?
Through the chair, to Councillor Glanders, I'd like to defer that question to my colleague from Finance.
Through the chair to Councillor Glanders, the approximate amount is 1.16 million, and that is funded annually through the budget. 2% of gaming revenue is allocated there.
Yeah, so I'm glad that that's the account that staff came back with recommending funding it from for this year, and it is clear that it is one time. I know that the Church on 5 team for after hours outreach is going to probably wind down after the end of this year, and we only just got our second outreach worker online in the last quarter of 2024, and I think there's still a lot of work that the teams need to do together to make sure it's a really functioning team. And I just think that this is what is urgently needed in our city right now. Like, people are talking about keeping our city safe and keep Richmond's streets clean and safe, and these people are out there all night driving people off of the streets and into shelters and putting out fires and resolving issues all night long and helping keep our city safe and helping these people reach the supports that they desperately need. And the transportation is essential to and from that, and our outreach team isn't able to do that during the day. So I agree with increasing Church on 5's by $20,000. I would like to move that if somebody else hasn't. Come back to that. And I had another comment, but it's escaped me. That's okay, I'll just leave it there for now.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, in light of last week's decision on supportive housing, and last year's decision on not hiring additional city-funded outreach workers, I think this is definitely on us to provide the services, even if it's not in-house, but provide the funding to have that happen and not delay it. I agree with the comments on trying to ensure that this is ideally not the full ask every year, but maybe it needs to be for the next multiple years. So when the motion's made, I will be supporting the extra 20,000 for Church on 5. And if no one else is making it, or I'm not sure if Councillor Day was asked for it first, but that extra 15,000 for St. Albans as well. Thanks.
Councillor Day.
Well, given the fact that we've got 1.16 million in the rate stabilization fund, and we have, well, whatever it's, the fund. My concern is for pennies on the dollar, we really get a value to the community. And so I would suggest that we maybe vote for an extra 15,000 for Parish St. Albans and an extra 20,000 for Church on 5. I would be supportive of that motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with a lot of what's been said around the table. I think that, certainly there's a lot of need out there. Certainly we've been giving a lot of money, and the amount that we've been giving has gone up every year. The amount of services the city itself is providing has increased year after year. And how many outreach workers do we have now through the chair to staff?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, city outreach workers, there are 2.
Okay, thank you. And how many bylaw are focused on supporting the unhoused and people at risk of homelessness?
Through the chair, I believe, to Councillor Liu, I believe there are 4.
Okay, giving services every day, and then there's other volunteers from other organizations. So, we're just seeing the need grow, and we're seeing more of a ground zero growing as a place to attract the people in need and services and everything else, and whether or not that's the appropriate place for it or not remains to be seen. I also wonder with the mobile food, that we know we've had conflicts with other people, other park users at the times that they're coming or the locations that they're coming for mobile foods. While we agree that people need to be fed and people deserve to be fed, continuing to create conflicts or preventing regular user groups from using certain parks is not our goal either. So, I think we do need to take a bit of a sober second look to some of these programs that we're supporting and how we're supporting them and how we're going to have sustainable funding for it. So versus, some groups being able to operate a program this year, throwing more money at it, not throwing money at it, running out of funding. It needs to be more sustainable, and it needs to have similar goals. So while the Church on 5's results are very commendable, I wonder what our own results are on our outreach workers, how many referrals they've made, how many people have been successful in the supports that they've had, those kinds of things, or people that have found permanent housing, that sort of thing. Because it's easy to get really excited by some of the numbers sometimes, but sometimes comparing it across the board makes more sense too, and having a standardized way of doing the counts for referrals and other successes is an important thing to do. It's important that we have KPIs on the programs that we're doing and the programs that we're supporting. Thank you.
Besides stressing that any funding is one time, what kind of a report do we get during or at the end of the year as to what they've actually done with the various monies that we're talking about?
To the chair, we require them to send or submit a grant use report, and that grant use report describes the outcomes that they have indicated in their proposal and how they spent the money that we've given them.
What happens if they don't submit a report at the end of the year and they don't ask for more money?
To the chair, if they don't submit a grant use report, they're not eligible to apply for another grant until they submit that grant use report.
All right, so it sounds like just
15 plus 20.
15 to A, and 20 to Church on Fire, which is B. Moved and seconded on the amendment. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And then on the main motion? No, it's already moved, it's already on the floor. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. All right, so I'm move adjournment. All right, I'm going to call to order the closed meeting.